this thing right here.
Bad or good, I learned from every experience that I've ever had. So I always look for that silver lining because somewhere there is one, even in bad situations or good. The good ones are easy to take. The bad ones, say, what is it that I can do to either make this better or get myself out of the situation because I don't like what's happening. So you just look for the good and the bad, and you make it work.
Wow. So according to us, so it's something that I actually created a couple years ago. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do a blog or a podcast. So I ended up just asking two of my best friends. We all grew up with each other. Hey, you want to join me in this crazy life and do this podcast? And they both said yes. It's like, that's great. And let's do this. So we just talk about different things.
It was also my first acting studio. So I was super shy. It's not that I was shy. I don't think I was shy when I started acting, but I was definitely out of my comfort zone. I remember that especially in those exercises, sensory memory and all of that. First of all, I was dealing with my accent. My accent was so bad because I had just moved to Miami from Cuba. So I was barely, learning English at the time. So my accent was really bad.
There's places I've gone where like the service hasn't been that great, or for me, it's sometimes you can tell it's like some marketing manager or PR company that's like running their Instagram account. So then like I'll show up at the restaurant and they'll be like, we don't know who you are. And I'll have to like show them messages and be like, hey, like, here's the invitation I received saying like, I have a table for 2 at 6 p.m. and that everything's taken care of. And they'll be like, oh, I don't know what this is.
As you get started, especially when you're working with a coach or a registered dietitian, because it helps me see truly what you're eating. But it also was a really great learning process for you as well. So I use an app called Healthy. It's what manages all of my nutrition business. And what I love about Healthy is, there's so many different apps out there, from MyFitnessPal to Lose It to the Fitbit one. There's so many different calorie trackers and apps you can use to journal or track your food, however you want to term it. What I like about Healthy is that it is just strictly journaling, and it takes away the whole calorie counting and, looking at your macros and all that kind of stuff, which I find many people can obsess about. And you can develop that negative relationship with food when you're just
I think I was below the poverty level. And yet, I think everybody gets into this business because there's a hunger in there, right? There's a hunger that says, look at me, love me, love me. And that even more so in the performing industry, acting and that sort of thing. I actually heard, I think on NPR, like I'm getting this percentage wrong, but like a ridiculously high percentage of people have had some sort of severe trauma. And so they're trying to make up for that love by being on TV or on a billboard or in an ad campaign. And so there's a little bit of that in the television industry too. You're putting yourself in front of people open to being judged with the hope that they will like you or love you. And I was a very goal-oriented person. I had this idea that, I was going to be in Rapid City, South Dakota one day, and the next day I was going to be on the Today Show, just like Katie Couric, and that is still a possibility.
They have you meet with a therapist there, and the women that do that work, God bless them, because they see everyone. They see all types of issues. My issue wasn't necessarily like whether or not I had the eggs. It was whether or not my womb would be okay. And would I be able to carry to full term? And, at the time I'm like, well, things are going pretty well with this one guy I'm seeing. And the therapist was like, look, okay, I've had women come through this door, multiple times. They're your age. And then the next thing you know, it's been a year and you have one egg left and you're not able to have
everything that you do to execute these huge events. And I think that that's kind of what I found super surprising, is that it truly takes a village. And I've said that my entire career because it's always taken a village. But coming into Vegas, people always kind of told me, oh, you want to work for a huge box, you can just book it and sit back and put your feet up, and I'm like, that kind of sounds cool, but I really like seeing the start to finish execution of things. And I really like the relational aspect of seeing things go from conceptual to experiential. And that was maybe something that I found so surprising, is that you really do, you book it and you turn it over, and then like the next team takes it and runs with it and then hands it over, and then the next team takes it and runs with it and hands it over until you're
It's
like
tough when it ends up going to hearing like that particular case did. You know, the goal of any special education advocate is to help resolve disputes at the team level, because it avoids not just the financial burden of moving forward with an attorney in a hearing, but also the emotional burden of it all.
But Amalfi Coast and like the Tuscany area are probably my favorite. My husband loved Rome and like all the history. My only drawback to Rome, it was so touristy. Like I feel like they're out to, I don't know, like they see Americans and they're like.
And then I don't even want to say fell into YouTube, because I was always doing some YouTube in some form, but I fell into it, and I fell into Sicily. It was a complete accident or coincidence, there are no accidents in life, it's a coincidence. How I met Alfred, I knew nothing about Sicily. My plan was never to move to Sicily. My plan was never to be a YouTuber. So, I believe God has a way of stirring us to the path that we should be on if we're open to it. And I'm very, very fortunate, very, very blessed that Sicily came into my life, that Alfred came into my life, and I had this journalistic background to be able to do YouTube. Although I have to tell you, doing YouTube.
I actually saw a UFO late. I don't exactly know. I moved out to Boston in '84, so it has to be like late '70s, early '80s, like within that time. My grandparents were having a party, and so they had a house right here, and they had a bunch of warehouses, their businesses and stuff like that. And so one night we were having a party, and their dog was just going crazy, barking. So a bunch of us went outside because we didn't know what the hell was going on out there. And she was, looking up at one of the warehouses across the street. And then that's when we saw it, because it didn't make any noise, but it was just like the typical saucer look, like the saucer look. And then it had like the circle lights underneath, and it was just hovering over the warehouse. And so we were just like all kind of like staring, it's kind of one of those, you wish you had a camera, but you didn't. This is back then when we didn't have, these things on our.
It's all in how you deliver a message too in sales. I'm a hard no on a lot of things, but I never say absolutely not. It's policy. It's our policy. No. And what you're doing is against our policy. No, absolutely not. Now, I can still deliver with authority too, and I can escalate my voice to a little, but it never comes without an explanation as to why this is the answer that you're about to receive. And usually when we're in something that's happened, the hotel and the customer, and we're having a battle, the first thing I usually say is, okay, look, I'm going to manage the expectation right now. There really are no winners. The hotel's not going to be a winner. They're losing money. You're not going to be a winner. But somewhere in the middle of this, because you're going to owe money, but somewhere in the middle is, where's the solution?
That no matter what you would have chosen to do, you would have been successful. I mean, we're very lucky to have you in San Diego, and it's been fun to see how you progressed in your career. And it's been fun to have somebody to talk to on a personal level. So just thankful for that, and that we've gotten to know each other on a personal basis. But you were talking about, kind of the differences in the three areas that you lived. Do you have favorites of each? Do you kind of mesh them all together, like you say, or?
Yeah, there's parts of London that I miss, but London's a very angry place. Everyone's mad about something. I love the history.
Because of the weather?
The weather, something else. They're just too packed in. It's very, I used to think I missed London. I went back last summer and I thought, this is just so claustrophobic. There's so much concrete. The wind doesn't really blow. This is why everyone's so angry. So London for the culture and the history. I miss being able to just pop into a museum that has just such a rich history, being able to walk down streets that look like they belong in a 15th century movie. Ireland is just, you can breathe a little bit more. People don't care as much about what you do. So there's not as much pressure to constantly succeed. You're not in this rat race all the time. At the end of the day, if you have a roof over your head and your family is healthy, that's all you really care about. And you can feel that. And definitely as I've progressed in my career over in the States, I've become part of that kind of rat race and, always on to the next step. Where am I moving next? What career am I going, what position am I going to strive for next? You just don't have that type of pressure back home in Ireland. So when I go home for a couple of weeks, I'm like, okay, now I can just decompress a little bit and realize that I don't always have to be chasing the dream. But then I get back here and I get very wrapped up in it, and I'm an ambitious person. And so I enjoy that there are people all around me over here that just keep pushing me to achieve. And then there's just the superficial things that America is incredibly convenient. My mom says this all the time. You're never going to be able to come back home because you can order something. My computer that I'm sitting here talking to you on right now, I ordered it and it was at my house in 2 hours. So that just doesn't happen in Ireland. There's got to be a ship and, a docks and all of this stuff. So there's those superficial parts of Ireland that I probably would have a hard time getting used to going back home. My mom always jokes about that. But it's very different, more family centric too than I've experienced in California.
Yeah, it's for my people in the streets. And this thing right here